in 1996, the Israelis, using an Apache helicopter, made here, of course, in the States, fired an air-to-ground missile into an ambulance filled with women and children. They killed 3 children, 2 women. I was just in front of the ambulance when it was hit. And I collected the bits of the missile and got the computer plate and fitted it together. We had to take some of the bits from the bodies. The United Nations helped me, UN troops. And through the Ministry of Defence in London, which was our defence correspondent making inquiries, we worked out that it had been made in Duluth, Georgia by Boeing. And I took all the bits here to the United States. I got them on Air France to Paris, and then we got amnesty to send them on to Washington. I didn't feel like turning up at JFK with missile parts, you know. You can imagine the reporting of that. And I got it down to the Duluth Boeing Works, and they thought I was writing a story about this wonderful missile. They didn't realize the background to it. And I put the pictures of the dead children and the wounded children on the desk, and I produced all the bits of the missile and laid it down. I said, "Is that your Hellfire or not?" And one of the Boeing executives who was in the boardroom was the designer. Another one was a senior corporate manager in the company, and of course there was a PR man there. And one of the men said, "Is this some kind of crusade?" You see, and I said, "I think you should rework your words. Don't use that on me. This is an inquiry into how your missile came to kill innocent civilians in southern Lebanon." And they were very upset about it. One of them said, "You know, we were soldiers in Vietnam. We don't believe in killing the innocent." I said, "But it's your missile. You know, how'd it get there?" And the line they took was that under the various U.S. export agreements, it is the U.S. government that insists that weapons supplied to a buyer, that the buyer has to abide by basic rules of war. And so basically Boeing was saying, you know, well, we make knives, but we're not responsible if they're used to stab people, you see. So anyway, I ran the story. It was called Return to Sender, because I'd actually got the missile back to the guy who made it and showed him what happened. And the amazing thing was we printed the computer part, right, the whole of the front page of our Sunday magazine in The Independent in London. And the next morning I got back to Beirut on Sunday night. And Monday morning I got a call from a French missile manufacturer. He said it wasn't sold to the Israelis. He said that missile was sold to the US Marine Corps. He asked to meet me secretly in the Lutetia Hotel in Paris. And I got the next plane to Paris from Beirut. This is very good for frequent flyer points, by the way. I got to Paris and he produced this secret NATO list of codings. And he said, Israel is 14 on it. But on the missile, the computer part, it says 01M. 01 is the United States on NATO codings, and M meant Marines. And I called the editor. He said, "Go straight to Washington, find out what the hell's going on," you see. Well, how did a Marine missile get fired by the Israelis? And eventually, after we contacted the commandant of the Marine Corps outside Washington, I was picked up and invited to meet senior Marine officers in plain clothes in their mess at a Marine base outside. You know, car went in, people saluted at the gate. And I handed all the photographs I left the missile with Boeing, of course, in Georgia. I thought they could put it in their museum. I don't think they did. But I had all the photographs, and they went through it. And the story came out very simply. I couldn't quote them by name, but, I mean, I used all the information. It was one of 700 AGM-114C missiles. AGM is air-to-ground missiles, called the Hellfire. The publicity, by the way, was all for one and one for all. They used the Alexandre Dumas quotation from Athos, Porthos, Aramis, and D'Artagnan from the Three Musketeers. Anyway, the Marines confirmed it was one of their missiles. They had bought 700 of them from Boeing and had taken all 700 to use against the Iraqi army in the liberation of Kuwait. We're talking 1990, 1991. They found that there was a misfire rate of 50%. Every 2 missiles, only one exploded, which was very interesting because the helicopter fired 2 missiles at the ambulance and only one exploded. The other landed unexploded beside a mosque. I found it. And I got the computer plate off that too. Anyway, and the Marines said that they had so many misfires that after they'd used up 350, they didn't use them anymore because they weren't reliable enough. And then they said they were instructed by Washington, by the Pentagon, with many other units with spare ammunition, to leave them at the Haifa munitions pier, take them there by boat to Israel. And it was part of a quid pro quo, a gift from the US government to the Israelis for not joining in the war against Iraq in 91. Remember, George Bush Sr. was very keen to keep the Israelis out of that war. And part of the payback for this was to be given all these free munitions that weren't used up. And so this missile had been made in Duluth, Georgia for the US Marines, taken to Kuwait, then taken into southern Iraq, then taken unused to the Haifa munitions pier in Israel, and then used in 1996 in the war between Hezbollah and the Israelis in southern Lebanon. And it was very interesting because we'd actually gone right back through all the people responsible, and not one, including the Israelis, said that they were responsible. They go, if there weren't terrorists, we wouldn't have fired the missile. You see, terrorists, quote unquote. I mean, we're always hearing about terrorists. And the amazing thing was that it was, Dwight D. Eisenhower, I think, was the person who first invented the phrase, the military-industrial complex. There it was. I went to the industry that made the missile and traced its military path, and everyone it killed was innocent.